What's up, guys? I'm Lizzie. Something I've realized recently is that I actually have quite a few beginner followers, which I don't know why it surprises me. But anyways, a handful of you have said that you want more beginner content, anything for beginners. And to me, one of the most important things every beginner should be taught and should know is proper saddle fit. I think it's highly overlooked, and I don't think it's something that most trainers will teach their students the importance of. So I'm just gonna go over the very basics, the most important aspects to the saddle and how it fits the horse for beginners, because if we're being honest, I'm not a professional saddle fitter. I've just been studying saddle fit for a very long time for myself because I really want to be able to know how to do it for my horses. And frankly, in my location, there is no good resources around me for good saddle fitters or good, custom saddle makers or whatever. So I really want to and need to know how to do this myself. So I've been teaching myself and learning, studying a lot. There's a lot of good resources online, a lot of good books. I've just been collecting as much information as possible. So I'm just gonna share the bare minimum of saddle fitting that I think every equestrian should know. Because if you're going to be purchasing a saddle, putting it on your horse, or riding it every single day, I think you should know how important it is that it fits. So there is so much more to saddle fitting than what I'm gonna show you. It is a whole rabbit hole, and I highly suggest you go follow Saddle Fit for Life on either Facebook or Instagram. They're extremely helpful and very informative, and they have a whole website that you can pay for if you want to get certified even and stuff. So that's where I learned a lot of my facts, so I suggest you go look there. Don't just stop here for your end of information. There's so much more out there. So to me, there are three aspects to the saddle fitting that are extremely important. So I'm gonna go over those three things right now. Every saddle has a tree, unless it's a treeless saddle. That's a whole other story. But the tree is either made out of metal, wood, or plastic. There might be other materials that I'm forgetting about too, but those are the main ones. And they are what distributes your weight onto the horse's back. They're what holds everything together, and it is the main thing that is supposed to make the saddle fit, but it is also the biggest thing to make the saddle not fit. So the three things are the width of your tree, the angle of your tree, and the length of your tree. See, every horse's shape is different. So you're gonna have narrow on top, wide down bottom. So you're gonna need a more narrow tree, but a wider angle. Or you're gonna have a wide shouldered horse that is kind of square. So you're gonna need a wide tree with a more narrow angle. And of course you have the whole channel that runs down the center of the saddle that is supposed to keep you off of the spine. So the part of the back that you want your weight distributed, so this is where you want the tree of your saddle to be sitting, is on this muscle right here. And this is called the longissimus muscle. So this runs on either side of the spine, and it sits on top of the ribs. So basically, on top of the longissimus muscle, on top of the ribs, is where you can distribute your weight the most evenly and not interfere with their movement and stuff. So obviously, the bone down the middle of their back is their spine, and along their spine is the multifidus muscle. And you can feel that tightness once you pull down. You can kind of feel the edge of that muscle ending. You want to really stay clear of this muscle. So you really want to make sure that the gullet of your saddle, the channel under the saddle, clears that area so that you have a wide enough space to allow the spine and the multifidus muscle to work and move without restricting them, pinching them, because lots of nerves and things in here that can really disrupt their movement and cause pain and bad reactions. So to recap, you want your saddle tree to be sitting on this longissimus muscle that runs along their back, and you do not want anything on the multifidus muscle or the spine. So you want to make sure that the whole spine is cleared of any pressure. Now, the length of the saddle is super important because remember, we're putting all of our weight onto the longissimus muscle, which runs on the rib cage. And once you get past their last rib, which is their 18th rib, you no longer have support back there to hold up the saddle. So you can cause a lot of issues back here. You're gonna be sitting right on top of their kidneys, I believe. So if you're putting any weight back here, you're gonna be causing a lot of pain on the horse, and you're gonna create a lot of issues, behavior issues, and long-term issues. So make sure that your saddle does not exceed the 18th rib. Now, you also want to make sure that your saddle does not go past the shoulder. A really common myth is that you want the tree of the saddle to sit on the horse's shoulder, and this is a really, really big no-no. You want to make sure that your tree does not go on top of the shoulder. It's supposed to sit right directly behind the shoulder and have enough clearance that the shoulder can move freely past that tree. So you need the proper width and angle of the tree to make sure that that shoulder can move freely through there without any interruptions. So Saddle Fit for Life, the company I mentioned earlier, has a program that you can get that'll teach you how to map out your horse's back. And that's going to really help you understand where all the muscles are, where the saddle should sit, and the things that you should keep clear of. So I highly recommend you look into that. I'm pretty sure they're still giving off the course for free if you ask for it. I'm not 100% sure. So I did that last fall. It was very informative. I'll put a picture up here of it. I would be marking her out again with chalk so that you could just see more of what I'm talking about, but she's shedding, so that would just be a huge mess. But with mapping out your horse, you can easily identify where that last rib is so you don't accidentally get a saddle that's too long for your horse, and of course every other aspect of the saddle fit. I'm not sponsored, I'm just a big fan. So I brought my English saddle too because I wanted to demonstrate on both saddles, because a lot of people like to assume that English and Western saddles are very different when they're really not. So again, you have your width of your tree and your tree angle and your gullet channel and the length of your saddle. Sorry, Stella. So all very similar aspects, but I do think that looking at an English saddle kind of helps you visualize the tree a little bit more because they're a little less covered up. So it is really common for saddle factories and people that make saddles to make the channel too narrow. I don't know why this is, but most saddles, especially English saddles, have too narrow of a channel. It's just the way they make them because they're not really considering the horse's anatomy when they're making them. So I don't know. It's super annoying when you're shopping for saddles because they're all made narrow, and this one is even more narrow than I would like. I don't really like the way that this saddle fits Stella or me, so I am in the market for a new saddle, but it's extremely hard to shop in my location because I have to do everything online, so it makes everything 10 times harder. But a good rule of thumb is that you want to be able to fit your whole fist into the channel or 4 fingers, which mine is a bit narrow, because that is the most common clearance that a horse needs for their spine and multifidus muscle. Now, that's not saying that every horse needs a wide channel saddle. If a saddle has too wide of a channel for your horse, it won't allow the proper clearance for the spine, and you'll end up putting weight on the spine, which is a no. You also want to find their girth groove, which usually has an indentation of where the highest point in their chest is, and that's where your cinch is going to naturally sit. You're going to find that line and you're gonna go straight up. And that is the area where you want your D-ring. Because what would happen if your D-ring was too far forward, it would make your cinch not straight, and it would eventually pull the saddle back to where the cinch is straight. Or if your D-ring was too far back, it would eventually pull the saddle up too far forward, because the cinch or the girth is always going to make itself straight. So if you start off with a cinch or a girth that's not straight, it is going to eventually make itself that way. Another aspect that is super important to recognize is the wither clearance. The wither is the area where a stallion will bite the mare in order to keep them from moving. It basically locks them up. So you can imagine if you have a saddle that is pinching this area, it's going to make it very difficult for them to be able to do their job right. And you see a lot of saddles that are putting weight on top of the spine wither area here, or they're sitting directly on top of the wither, and it's just super uncomfy for them, and definitely something to look out for. In order to make sure that your saddle is distributing your weight evenly across the horse's back, you have to make sure that every part of the saddle is making even contact, and there's no one pressure point here and one pressure point here, or uneven pressuring. Because if you have a flat saddle, when you have a horse with a dip in their back, you're going to have a pressure point here and a pressure point here. But if you have a horse with a more rounded back and a straight saddle, you're just going to have a pressure point here and a pressure point here. So you really want to make sure that the shape of your saddle is matching the shape of your horse's back. Another thing that's important to note is that when you are fitting your saddle to your horse, make sure that every aspect of the saddle fits the horse without the saddle pad, because the pad is not there to make the saddle fit. It is just there for the padding. So if you ever have a saddle fitter fit your saddle to your horse and fix your issue with half pads or shims or gel pads or things like breast straps and special girths or whatever, they're not actually fixing your issue. They might even be making it worse. Athletes that wear things like skates and running shoes and cleats, they need these equipment to fit tightly and comfortably without shims and thicker socks and extra pairs of socks or whatever. They need to fit comfortably and tightly. And that is the same with the saddle, because you need that support and that ability to move freely without all of that material in there keeping your foot from doing what it needs to do. Another thing you can do is just drop your cinch or your girth and it falls in the girth groove, you're good. Now, my saddle is not the best demonstration for a perfect fitting saddle. It doesn't fit as well as I wish it would. It's super hard to find a Western saddle that fits an Icelandic, for one, and for two, again, my location is just awful for trying to find new saddles and stuff. So I'm struggling a little bit. To make sure that your saddle is fitting in the right spot, you want to be able to slide your hand behind their shoulder and make sure it's sitting behind their shoulder and not on top of it. And your hand can move somewhat easily through the whole thing. There's no pockets of easy movement and pockets of difficult movement, because that means that there's uneven contact. And we also have clearance through the whole channel, so we can fit our whole hand through there. Another thing to note with Western saddles is the skirt, which is going to make it look like your saddle might be surpassing the 18th rib when it's just the skirt. But there's no tree under the skirt, so you're not actually putting weight where the skirt is. The skirt is just a skirt. So I've had people saying that my saddle is not balanced and it sits up too high in the back because the skirt sits up. But you want the skirt to sit up a little bit because you don't want it to be digging into their rump where their back curves up for their rear end. So you do want a bit of a curve in the back of your saddle so you're not pinching and rubbing off any hair. And you want your saddle to be evenly balanced, so if you try to push on either end, you're not getting any rocking motion. It's nicely balanced. That's usually a good sign. Another thing I wanted to mention is the placement of your cinch buckle or your girth buckle. So there's the pectoral muscle down here, then there's the latissimus muscle that runs up here. And it's really important that your buckle does not land on the pectoral muscle or the edge of the latissimus muscle. The pectoral muscle is very important for the leg movement and such, so you really do not want to be hindering that at all. There's also the thoracic vein that runs above the pectoral muscle over here, which is another thing that you do not want your buckle to land on. So in between these two areas, about right here, is the sweet spot where you want your buckle. Or if you have an English saddle, your buckle might go above the edge of the latissimus muscle up here, but you never want it on the edge of the latissimus muscle. I don't know if I'm drawing the correct lines. She's very hairy, so it's very hard to see where, things are. But on a horse with much less hair than her, it's really easy to see where the thoracic vein is and the running of the pectoral muscle and stuff. So it's not that complicated. I'll put some pictures up so that you can get an idea of where the muscles are and where they're located, so you know where not to put your cinch buckle. It's also extremely important that the saddle fits the rider as well. If your saddle fits your horse really well but does not fit the rider, it is going to make the saddle not fit the horse. If it's putting the rider in the chair seat, or if it's making them unbalanced, or if it's a saddle designed for males when you are a female, it can make you sit in an uncomfortable position. It can make you sit off-centered and post poorly and carry your weight badly, which is obviously going to interfere with your saddle to horse fit. But that is a whole nother rabbit hole that I'm not going to get into right now. So if you want me to get into it, let me know down in the comments. There's so much more to saddle fitting than what I just touched on, so I highly recommend you go and keep researching. Don't just end here. That's kind of what my channel is for, is just to pique your interest and encourage you to continue learning. But that is it for this video, guys. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, give it a big like and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. You can go and follow me on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll see you guys next week, Sunday. Bye!